It's time to rebuild some brake calipers for the little 400 Honda. So we have some new seals now, so the first thing we need to do is split the calipers and get the pistons out. Isn't that right, Adam?
Yes.
So this is one of the brake calipers off the Honda, and last time we tried to get the pistons out by just blowing an airline down the sort of banjo hole, most of the pistons didn't move, which is a bit of a problem. So what we're going to do this time is we're actually going to split the calipers in half. So we're going to take the bolts out of here, take the caliper in half, and then get a slide hammer in and actually try and sort of whack the pistons out. And as if by magic, here's one we made earlier. Not the smoothest transition you've ever seen on the telly, but there you go. So,
One of them out.
one of the pistons came out, but then nothing else would. So, here we are. We have split the calipers in half. There is two little seals that go between the two caliper halves, but we have some new ones in our new seal kit from Powerhouse. And so now we're going to get a little bit of heat and a little bit of slide hammer action on it and see if we can knock some of the seals out. Pistons out. Pistons out and the seals out. I do know what I'm talking about. Honest. So we have the slide hammer inserted into the piston, the caliper half in the vise. So now Adam will attempt to extract. We are trying this cold first to see if it moves. It is moving.
Is it? Oh yeah, there we go. Hey!
So we have in here two seals. A dust seal, and then behind it the actual main oil seal, the fluid seal. And you can sort of see what looks like a little bit of corrosion sticking out around the dust seal. So when we pick the dust seal out, that's probably got quite a bit of corrosion behind it, and it's pushing the seal onto the piston and making everything very tight, which is why the piston didn't want to come out. So Adam's going to pick the seals out, give them a bit of a clean up with either a wire brush or actually the end of a pick, and then we'll put the new seals in. Everything should slide together quite nicely. So you can see the corrosion in the bottom of the piston track there, the seal track. So what Adam's going to do is clean all of that out. With the new seals in, everything should be considerably happier. So while Adam is scrubbing away in a very small hole, I've taken the pistons out of the other half of the caliper, and the small piston was, fairly snug. The big piston actually came out relatively easily, but that could be because at some point somebody's actually taken the dust seal out. So I'm guessing they had a similar problem with the dust seal holding the piston in place. So instead of replacing the seal, they just took it out. Because you actually only need the inner seal, because that's the fluid seal. The outside one is just a dust seal to keep the weather and horribleness out. It is kind of useful to have it in though, especially on a road bike. So Adam's done a really nice job of making the seal tracks corrosion free, so they're good to go. So the next thing to do really is to put some seals in them. So we have some seals, and they come in a bag, and there's big ones for the oil seals and little ones for the dust seals. So they're ready to go in, and they need to be lubed up. So we have some red rubber grease, and this actually comes with the seal kit. If not, if you're buying your seals from somewhere else, you can just use normal red rubber grease. It is specific for brake caliper applications. So we have some of that, and of course we're going to need some pistons. So this is the state of one of the pistons when it came out, and as you can see, it's unpleasant, to say the very least. It's covered in horrible brownness, and we don't like things covered in horrible brown. So here's one I cleaned up earlier. This is one of the ones that was in it, and there is a little bit of corrosion in a couple of places, a little bit of pitting, but there's no sort of raised up bits that will rub on the seals, and in general they're not too bad. So they'll go in, and again we'll give everything a smear with red rubber grease. And Adam can make a lovely job putting it all back together. What we want is a nice generous smear of lube on the ring, so we can then finger it all over the ring and slide it into the hole. When that one's done, we can do the same with the dust seal. Nice smear of oil and slip it in. And then when that one's happily tucked away, we can put a little smear of lube onto the piston, and then once we've got it nice and lined up, it should drop in quite easily. So Adam's done a lovely job of rebuilding his calipers. There is no corrosion under anything. He's got new seals. He's lubed everything up nicely. The pistons are all cleaned up fairly well. We've put new seals in the sort of jointing halves of the calipers. There's new bleed nipples on. They are now ready to go back on the bike. Happy days. Talk me through what you're going to do to bleed your brakes.
Well, I'm going to put some of Motor's finest 3/4 dot in that, and then in that cut it'll bleed down the pipes. I do the little pumpy of the lever, and then it comes all the way down, and I've opened up the little bleed nipple here, and then it'll flow into here, so we get all the air out of it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
To give a slightly more technical version of it, you pump the mass cylinder to basically push the fluid down here, down the brake lines, and then it fills the caliper up, and then it can come out the bleed nipple, which Adam's got open here, and into our pipe. And we shall keep doing that bit by bit until there is no air left in it and the lever is nice and stiff. Are you looking forward to having something stiff in your hand?
Always. Ooh, yeah. That's
Lovely. Lovely stiffy you've got there.
it is.
Right, so, did it take quite a long time to bleed all the air out of your calipers?
Well, we started this, just after breakfast, and now it's lunch. So, yes.
But you say
Lots
straight
of-
after breakfast?
Well,
11's is. And now it's lunch.
that is breakfast, isn't it? You know, you don't eat breakfast as soon as you get up. You wait for a few hours and then go to the burger van for a bacon egg bar.
Right, okay.
At mid-morning, that is breakfast.
So, having done your 11's breakfast run, it's now lunchtime, but your brakes are bled.
Yes, it only took about an hour-ish.
Yeah. Do you have to do a little bit of cleaning up down at your calipers?
No, everything's perfectly acceptable.
Okay.
I'm going to take, just for peace of mind though, and because it's going to do your OCD a world of good, I'm actually going to take them off and give them a bit of a clean. Get any brake fluid off there, because, you know, brake fluid on the outside isn't as good as brake fluid on the inside. So, yeah, bit of a clean. Jobs are good in.
So, what's on the list, Adam?
Front wheel out, that's being powder coated to go gloss black. We're taking the clip-ons off, they're going to be painted because they're a bit there. And the side stand, because it's horrible. It looks like it's been dug out of the sea.
And so it's going to be wheel out, discs off, bearings and seals out, and then we're going to have to take the tyre off it. And it's not the end of the world. And then, as he says, handlebars, just because they've got a little bit of corrosion and bits around them, and I think we can make them look nicer. And the less we look at that, the better.
Yep,
Right, crack on then, son.
splendid. Glove me up, the surgeon is here.
They're over there.
Thanks.
So now Adam has his wheel out, he needs to strip the bearings and seals out of it. So firstly, the seals. So, a large screwdriver and a bit of a, well, a bit like that, but hopefully the seal will actually come out. Yeah, pretty much like that, yeah. We have to get that right behind the back of the seal, so sort of behind that bit of it. Which is proving quite awkward on these. There we go. And then just give it a little bit of a push, and out comes the seal. So the next thing to do is to get the bearings out, which are luckily nice and new. So hopefully they'll come out relatively easily. Right, so Adam's just finished with the hot air gun warming all this area up round here, so the bearing should come out relatively easily. And what I've done there is I've attached a bearing puller, and I've just got it just inside the lip of the bearing. So if Adam gives that a little bit of a pull, go on Adam, give it a bit of a tug. That bearing's quite in there, isn't it?
Yes,
Right, warm it up a bit more.
more heat.
Bit more heat. Put your foot against it. Hey! That came out easy enough.
Yeah.
The second time. Right, and then the centre sleeve can just slide out there. And then you can use the bearing puller on the other bearing, on the other side of the wheel, down there. Or we can get a punch in and tap it from the inside. Doesn't really make a lot of odds at this stage. So what you got there, Adam?
Side stand. Chunk of metal.
Excellent. And what's the plan with these two items?
Cut that, cut a bit off there, and then weld it into there, because it's actually quite short, and the bike leans over a long way.
Yes, because the rear shock, or even the original rear shock with having that 4mm spacer in, that 4mm spacer will have added somewhere around about 10 mil to the ride eye to the bike, and therefore we need to make the side stand longer to compensate for this.
Yep.
So, conveniently, the side stand is made of steel and is quite heavy, and is made of 19 mil bar, which is actually 3/4, and that is also 19 mil steel bar. So yeah, we'll cut 10 mil of bar and weld it into the side stand.
Manly things on a Saturday.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
And
Excellent. Let's get cutting and sticking with metal.
yay! So before we cut it and weld it, we're actually going to shot blast it and get rid of all the paint off it, because it's going to get repainted anyway, and that way we're not trying to weld on top of the paint, which will just mess everything up. So we're going to shot blast that first, and then we're going to cut it about there, and we're going to weld some bits into it. You look far too happy for a man who has to do shot blasting and welding.
Yes, because I've never done them before, and I've always wanted to have a go at doing shot blasting, but especially welding. Never done it, really fancy a go at it. See it on the telly going, fancy a go at that. And that's my opportunity.
I will guarantee you that your welding will not look like anything you've previously seen on the telly.
Whoa. I have watched many YouTube videos on how to weld. I am going to be the master straight off. You wait and see. The next time anyone sees this footage and that side stand, perfect. Perfect, I tell you.
So we have a shot blast cabinet, which is kind of useful, and we have an air line attached to it and some power going in for the light. So if we look down here, and let's face it, I'm going through a slightly dirty screen to look through, so it's not ideal. We have, there we go, the stand, not a broken window, and the sort of pivot block the stand goes onto. And then if I put my hand in here, we have these wonderful sort of gloves. Thank you, Adam. Thank you.
Welcome.
Pleasure. And the gun. And, you know, every man loves a gun. Right, the airline that's going to it, you can see there, that has air going to it. Oh, actually, no, the red one has air going to it.
So the air gun has air going to it,
It does. It has air going to it in the red thing, and then the trigger allows the air to come through, and there's a Venturi effect, and it sucks the grit through and blasts it at the stuff. So if we do a... And there you go. It's blasting the paint off already. That was easy. And it's also quite boring after about 10 seconds, so Adam gets to do the rest.
Yes. Feel like a mad scientist.
So Adam has done a lovely job of shot blasting these bits. So the next thing he needs to do is cut that about there, and then we can weld some tube into it. So here we have 2 pieces of stand and a piece of tube. It is mild steel, so it will weld really quite nicely to these. The only slight problem is my welding's not very good, and Adam's never welded anything in his life. So, as we always say, what could possibly go wrong? Are you enjoying yourself, Adam?
Yes, because I'm melting metal sticks onto other metal sticks, and it's cool.
Excellent. Right, I'll close my eyes. You carry on.
Okay. Welding.
Clear?
Clear. So for a first timer, not massively bad.
Now, let's see what that looks like.
Then just grind it off. Job will be a fish.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty darn good for your first attempt, but it's not perfect, but it is pretty good. I think you should be...
First go welding, 2 bits of metal together.
I think you should be impressed with that. I think you should be pleased with that.
I am. I'm very pleased. I might just leave the bit of weld on there.
Just so
Just
you
to
know.
remind me, that's my first ever weld.
I wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't either. I'm going to go and grind it off. I've learnt much. I like welding. It's fun. Not the best at it, but not as bad as, someone with no eyes and no hands. So it was almost all right. But once it's all ground down, it's fine. So we're waiting for some bits to come back from powder coating and a few of the bits of painting. So we thought we'd tackle the exhaust, because that shouldn't be like that.
that should be like this part here, nice and lovely and whatnot. So what we're going to do is cut out the back. Get a hammer and maybe a bit of wood or something, and just repeatedly hit this part from the inside until it goes nice and flat. Then we just weld the back up, because my welding abilities are amazing.
So there were two options for how to do this job, and one of them was to weld studs onto here and then slide hammer the dent out of it. And we've opted against that because I haven't got the right attachment on my slide hammer for sort of tacking nuts onto here and doing it, because it's actually a bearing puller slide hammer. And Adam really liked cutting and welding things. So he's going to be using that Dremel to cut a hole in the back of here so they can get in with the punching bits and knock most of the dent out. And if it looks absolutely terrible when he's finished, it doesn't really matter because it looks absolutely terrible now.
Oh, yeah, boy.
So Adam's done a lovely job of cutting this section out here, but what we didn't know was that underneath the sort of outside material there is a little bit of sort of perf tube stuff and a little bit of silencing material. And we're not sure how far along here it goes, and whether we'll check if it goes into this part here or whether it is literally just in this little collector section. And if it's just in the collector, what we might do is cut it out and knock the dent out and not worry about it. So this section of perf actually only really goes a little bit further around here and isn't particularly critical. So what we're going to do now that Adam's cut that out is get a punch and a hammer and basically knock that dent out as best you can. Something like that. And hopefully we can make it not look like it's quite as dented, and then we can make an absolute pig's ear of welding everything back together.
Yes.
I've never seen a man happier than Adam sat on a cold concrete floor hitting a piece of metal with a hammer.
A lot of it has come out.
Oh yeah, that's looking... I mean, it's not exactly mint, but it is at least somewhere near the right shape.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to hammer it out a little bit more, and then I'm going to go over it and just kind of tap it down flat and then get all the scuffs off of it.
Best of luck.
Thanks, dude.
So with a bit of teamwork, we've managed to get pretty much all of the dents out of that. And the initial hit it with a piece of nylon against a piece of wood was okay for taking the worst of the dents out. But in the end, we actually want to knocking it onto a proper beating table lump thing. I don't know the real name. And I was on the pipe and Adam was hitting it. And it worked out pretty well. We have got the vast majority of the marks out of that, or the dents anyway. So the next thing to do is trying to remove some of the scratches. Now, we are fully aware that in the end this will need an actual polish, but for now, to take some of the scratches out, Adam is going to have a go with a flap wheel on an angle grinder. It is fair to say we are not natural metal workers, so it's a learning curve, but so far, I think we're doing all right.
I have been known to have the touch of said elephant.
But that is looking almost like it's not been really heavily crashed at some point in its life. Are you pleased with progress, Adam?
Doing some practical stuff is lots of fun, and you can almost get really good results for it for first timers, so I'm dead pleased. I don't need to go and spend another couple of £100 on more parts for the RVF.
You say that, but we haven't welded the back of the collector back on yet.
You see my welding. It's amazing.
This is why I'm still slightly concerned. So we now have a relatively dent-free exhaust pipe, but the only slight issue, of course, is it has a hole in it. We're not putting the perf tube thing back in because it doesn't really do anything. So what we've just done is flatten the edges over so it isn't sort of sticking out in the airflow, and then we've given everything a bit of a clean up, so we've got rid of most of the impurities for welding, and that sort of balances about there-ish, and we'll tack it in a couple of places, and then we can give it a little bit of a tweak to get it to sit right and do the rest of the welding. Of course, the only game with this is neither me or Adam are particularly good at welding.
Speak for yourself.
So in a minute, this might look like a flock of pigeons have pooed across it.
No.
Right, so sit rep on the first bit. We've blown a hole in it because we've put a bit too much ampage in it, so we'll lower the power a little bit and see if we can actually get it stick together. But at least now I don't actually have to hold it, which is a bonus. Any good? Oh yeah, that's better, isn't it?
Yes. Much better.
Right, so that's that much better. We've actually got a weld, and interesting as it cools down, it's actually flicking bits of the slag off, which is interesting. So that's it. As it cools down, it's cleaning itself, as all the metal contracts. That's kind of cool. Right, we'll let that cool for a second, give it all a bit of a wire brush off so it's reasonably clean, and then carry on with the next bit. So after a couple of hours of work, you can see it's coming along beautifully. We have learned a couple of bits already. Adam's arc welding is not as good as he thinks. I hate arc welding, but I am now reteaching myself TIG welding, so that's one of my TIG joints, not that we can actually focus on it. That's one of my TIGs, and I've had to fill in some holes that we blew in it earlier with some TIG, but we don't actually have the right filler material. So I think what we might do is outsource this to people who actually know what they're doing.
Thanks for watching, and join us again next time when we'll be doing more of the RVF goodness.